Facebook right now has characterized the reason why they turned off their break the glass measures after the US 2020 election was because they don't believe in censorship. These measures had largely nothing to do with content. There were questions around how much do you amplify a live video? Do you give it a 600x multiplier or a 60x multiplier? Little questions where Facebook optimized their settings for growth over safety. And I think there's a real thing that we need to think about safety by design first. And Facebook should have to demonstrate that they have assessed the risks. They must be mandated to assess the risks. And we need to specify how good is that risk assessment, because Facebook will give you a bad one if they can. And we need to mandate that they have to articulate solutions, because Facebook is not articulating what's the 5-point plan to solve these things.
The last area I really want to think about is, obviously all the documents you bring come from Facebook, but we can't really regulate for this company in this moment. We have to look at the sector as a whole, and we have to look into the future. And I just wonder whether you have any advice for that, because we're not trying to kill Facebook, we're trying to make the digital world better and safer for its users.
Engagement-based ranking is a problem across all sites, right? All sites are going to be, it's easier to provoke humans to anger. Engagement-based ranking figures out our vulnerabilities and panders to those things. I think having mandatory risk assessments and mandatory remediation strategies, we need ways to hold these companies accountable, is critical, because companies are going to evolve. They're going to figure out how to sidestep things. And we need to make sure that we have a process that is flexible and can evolve with the companies over time. I think there's an opportunity. Imagine if for each of those integrity systems, Facebook had to show you a sampling of content at different scores, right? We would be able to come in there. So a problem that I'm really concerned about is that Facebook has trouble differentiating but in many languages, the difference between terrorism content and counterterrorism content. So think about the role of counterterrorism content in society. It's how people make society safer. Because Facebook's AIs don't work very well, for the language that was in question, I believe it was an Arabic dialect, 76% of the counterterrorism content was getting labeled as terrorism. If Facebook had to disclose content at different scores, we could go and check and say, oh, interesting, this is where your systems are weak and for which languages, because each language performs differently. I think there is a real importance for if there were a fire hose for Facebook, and Facebook had to disclose what the scoring parameters were, I guarantee you researchers would develop techniques for understanding the roles of those scores and amplifying which kinds of content.
Nicholson.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair, and thank you so much for joining us. You might be interested to know that you're trending on Twitter.
Right now?
So people are listening.
Yeah.
I thought the most chilling sentence that you've come out with so far this afternoon, and I wrote it down: anger and hate is the easiest way to grow on Facebook. I mean, that's shocking, isn't it? What a horrendous insight into contemporary society on social media that should be the case.
One report from Facebook demonstrates how there's different kinds of feedback cycles that are all playing in concert. So it said, when you look at the hostility of a comment thread, so let's look at a single publisher at a time and take all the content on Facebook and look at the average hostility of that comment thread. The more hostile the comment thread, the more likely a click will go out to that publisher, right? Anger incites traffic outwards, which means profit. We also see that people who want to grow really fast, they do that technique of harvesting viral content from other groups and spreading into their own pages, into their groups, and they bias towards stuff that gets an emotional reaction. And the easiest emotional reaction to get is anger, and psychology research has shown this for decades.
Kate, does Facebook care whether or not Instagram is safe for a 10-year-old?
What I find very deeply misleading about Facebook's statements regarding children is they say things like, we need Instagram kids because kids are going to lie about their age, and so we might as well have a safe thing for them. Facebook should have to publish what they do to detect 13-year-olds on the platform, because I guarantee you what they're doing today is not enough. And Facebook's own research does something where Facebook can guess how old you are with a great deal of precision because they can look at who your friends are, who you interact with.
Because you're at school.
Yeah, because
that's a bit of a giveaway.
Oh,
if you're
yeah.
wearing a school uniform,
Yes.
chances are you're on 20.
But I want to disclose a very specific thing. This is something actually the Senate found when we disclosed the documents to them. They found that Facebook had estimated the ages of teenagers and worked backwards to figure out how many kids lied about their ages and how many were on the platform. And they found for some cohorts 10 to 15%. 10 to 15% of 10-year-olds were on the platform. Facebook should have to publish those stats every year so we can grade how good were they at keeping kids off the platform.
Right. So Facebook can solve this if it wants to do so.
Facebook can make a huge dent on this if they wanted to, and they don't because they know that young users are the future of the platform, and the earlier they get them, the more likely they'll get them hooked. We'll do it after.
Just on that point about intent, I mean, someone may not have intended to do a bad thing, but if their actions are causing that, and they're told about it, and they don't change their strategy, then what do you say about them then?
I am a big proponent of we need to look at systems and how systems perform, and this idea that, and actually this is a huge problem inside of Facebook. Facebook has this philosophy that they can, if they establish the right metrics, they can allow people free reign, right? They, like I said, they're intoxicated by flatness. They have the largest open floor plan office in the world. It's 1/4 of a mile long in one room, right? They believe in flatness. They believe that if you pick a metric, you can let people do whatever they want to move that metric. And that's all you have to do. If you had better metrics, you could do better actions. But that ignores that if you learn data that metric is leading to harm, which is what meaningful social interactions did, that the metric can get embedded. Because now there are thousands of people who are all trying to move a metric, and people get scared to change a metric and make people not get their bonuses. And so I think there is a real thing of there is no will at the top. Mark Zuckerberg has unilateral control over 3 billion people, right? There's no will at the top to make sure these systems are run in an adequately safe way. And I think until we bring in a counterweight, things will be operated for the shareholders' interest and not for the public interest. I am deeply concerned about Facebook's role in hurting the most vulnerable among us. Facebook has studied who has been most exposed to misinformation, and it is people who have been recently widowed, people who are recently divorced, people who moved to a new city, people who are socially isolated. And I am deeply concerned that they have made a product that can lead people away from their real communities and isolate them in these rabbit holes, in these filter bubbles. Because what you find is that when people are sent targeted misinformation to a community, it can make it hard to reintegrate into larger society because now you don't have shared facts. So that's the real harm. I like to talk about the idea of the misinformation burden instead of thinking of it as, because it is a burden when we encounter this kind of information. Facebook right now doesn't have any disincentive for trying to do high quality shorter sessions. Imagine if there was a syntax that was a penny an hour, right? So this is like dollars a year for Facebook per user. Imagine if there was a syntax that pushed Facebook to have shorter sessions that were higher quality. Nothing today is incentivizing them to do this. All the incentives say if you can get them to stay on the platform longer, you'll get more ad revenue, you'll make more money.